I'm about to have a conversation with Emma Harrison, a recently qualified mountain leader who lives in Hertfordshire. Emma has a spinal cord injury, which impacts all movement and sensation from her collarbone down, as well as her balance and stamina. We're going to have a chat about her motivation for getting a qualification, how she found the process, and what she's planning to do with it now. Could you just share a little bit about your spinal injury and what it means to you day to day, how it impacts you?
Yeah, of course. So I have a C6 spinal cord injury, which affects bodily functions basically from the level of my collarbone down. So that's things like sensation, movement. I suffer with spasms, excess muscle tone. My bladder and bowel don't function properly. Balance and coordination can be difficult at times. And I guess also it takes a lot of energy to move around and do things that once were easy. So I struggle a lot with sort of energy management as well.
And have you always been a walker then? Did you walk before your spinal cord injury?
Yeah, I did a lot of walking before my injury. Yeah.
And was it hard to get back into post injury?
Yeah, incredibly. I think one thing that I always wondered early on in my rehab for my injury was that whether or not I'd be able to actually get outside and walk again, because there was a real focus in neuro rehab of kind of walking up and down a gym space. There isn't much focus actually on getting people back out into moving independently in the real world.
Got yeah. So a focus on kind of flat, very flat, even surface across a floor as opposed to uneven steps or a mountain.
Yeah, and a lot of physios basically saying that's just way off feasible. It's never going to happen. So I spent a long time looking for physios who weren't going to say that. And when I say a long time, I mean probably about 4 years.
Wow. Did you find one eventually?
Yeah, eventually I found one. And about 6 months after he first started working with me, he took me up Pen y Fan.
Awesome.
Which you would think of as being a fairly simple mountain. We went up the main track. But actually it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And we didn't even make it to the trig point. We made it about 2/3 of the way up. And they had to probably carry me for about 4 miles. And it took close to 5 hours. So, yeah, it was a good challenge, and it was a good stepping stone to knowing that it is possible. But it also was a real kind of kick in the gut of this is going to be much, much harder than I'd ever anticipated. Given that was mainly on a path and the environment I wanted to get back into isn't generally.
Were you working up until your injury? Were you able to work at all post injury?
So that kind of ties into the mountain leader, I guess. In that I used to be a designer, and one of the main current impacts really is that my dexterity is not very good. So my gross grip is quite good. I've worked on that a lot, and it's come back to a certain extent. But fine motor skills haven't really. And so I spent several years trying to regain those skills, just like I had done with other movement skills. But a couple of years ago, I guess I started thinking, okay, right, what could be a secondary route? This isn't seeming to have much impact, and what else could I do? And that mountain leader was one of the things that came up as the offshoot of what I'm now hoping to create.
That's really interesting. Could you expand a little bit more on what it is you're hoping to create?
Yeah, sure. So my goal long term is to be able to create an access point for people with disabilities and severe injuries to be able to get back into the mountains So I hope to provide sort of graded walks and also graded camps. So where you potentially set up a wild camp, but in an environment that you can control. So maybe on farms and things like that, where there are easy access points if needed, but you're in wild camping facilities or lack of campsite facilities, essentially. So you're simulating a lot of things that you could come across in the mountains. That's something I had to do a lot of. And I think it's something that people don't do, because I hear of people going back and trying things and failing because they haven't simulated it. And I think it's actually a really nice package that could be, a really nice group of things that could be packaged up and given to someone as a package to do.
To work through, so that it's progressive and they're kind of, re-establishing that familiarity or adapting to how things are now for them.
Yeah, exactly. And then the idea with those is that I would grade them as well. So you would start off on fairly flat terrain, and then we would go over to a national park, but maybe not head for the hills, maybe head around lakes and things like that. But you've still got challenging terrain underfoot, and then the next step of that would be easy mountains, and then progressions on from there, I guess.
Have you always known that mountain leader was a qualification, or was it something that you came across while you were in rehab?
So I've always known that it's there, but I guess I've never really. I was quite an avid hiker, capable of navigating, so I've never really seen the need for a mountain leader, I guess I would say. I've always been in groups with people that are completely capable and out with other capable people. And I think it was only once I became injured and started talking to people like physios about going out into the mountains, you realize the insurance implications and the safety and the risk assessments and stuff, and actually how much easier that is if there's mountain leaders who are used to being in that environment present. So I think that's where my awareness of actually what the role is and how it can help probably came through.
Did you have much of a conversation with any trainers prior to the training course, and kind of where were you already at in terms of knowing what you needed to make a day successful out in the hills?
I think in terms of make a successful day, I was fully aware of what I needed. I think in terms of the prerequisites for the courses, there are a few things that I had ironed out with mountain leaders who work on courses. So I'd been out with, I think, 3 different mountain leaders on sort of solo training days where we'd looked at a specific a specific part of the syllabus, and we'd said what accessibility requirements are going to be needed in order to be able to set this up or do this and make this possible that you can even attend the training. So by the time I went into the training, I was approaching the provider saying, I can do this section, but I need to do it this way, and I can do this section, but I need to do it this way. Are you going to be okay with that? So I had ironed it all out beforehand. I think I probably needed to do that, because within the realm of the course was quite heavy on like getting through things at a pace. They wouldn't have had the time to take me aside for 2 days and work out rope systems. There just wasn't the capacity for that within the course, where there's one instructor for 6 people.
Are you able to describe any of the systems that you had in place? You were talking about ropes just then.
Yeah, so for instance, one thing with the ropes is that I can set up the rope system fine, and I can use a rope to belay someone, but the untying of knots is really, really difficult for me because I don't have great pincer grip. So one really simple thing actually was just to put a carabiner inside the knot when I was tying it. And therefore it didn't ever get quite as tight. And it was easier for me to undo and set up that same system somewhere else or whatever you're asked to do. But had I not gone out with someone that knew and could help me work through, okay, that's actually your biggest challenge. Like, let's spend an hour figuring out what bits you can do, what bits you can't do, and what you can carry that's super light and isn't actually requiring that much extra kit. It's not requiring a whole different setup, because I guess the other thing we did was experiment with slings and figure of eights and all that. But it was like, actually, I don't need that. I can do that. I can do it the way they want you to do it, with a little small adaptation. But
so how did you then make a plan for your own development?
There's somebody who runs a charity that has supported me a lot, that they provide or help train people to go on expeditions, but it's members of the disabled community. And they had already helped me with mountain days, some of which I used as QMDs. So I went to them saying, who do you know that can help me? And they linked me up with several different mountain leaders, international mountain leaders, other people that had had different injuries but had managed to get through it. And I also reached out independently to a few people with disabilities that I knew had done the course or become mountain leaders. So I pieced all of those together to say, actually, what my understanding from all of that to come back was, I need to go with a really solid plan. And I need to say, this is on the syllabus. This is the way I do it. Are you okay with that way? And I need to do that before I even book an assessment. And then once that's all tidied up and packaged up, I can go and book an assessment. And once I've booked an assessment, I can tidy up the other, filling out QMDs and making sure you've got all the essential requirements and doing things like learning plants that I just needed to sit and do, really.
And psychologically, being assessed is quite a stressful experience generally. Did you find, how did you manage that? Everybody has their own coping strategies, don't they, for managing stress or assessment nerves? Did you find that was something familiar to you, or did you have to do different things to try to help yourself get through the process?
I think for me, it was being as prepared as I could be. So like I said, I'd made sure I had all the prerequisites, was really confident in all those areas. I'd been out, things that I was less confident in, I guess I'd practiced within the month before the assessment, just to make sure it was all fresh at the front of my mind. And I think that's part of going out with qualified mountain leaders, is getting their hints and tips about, well, just by changing this ever so slightly, it looks better from the outside. And when they say that to you, think, okay, well, that's good to know, because now I know that they're going to view that in a superior way, I guess.
Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, so I guess for one thing, for instance, like confidence roping, right? I need to walk with my sticks at all times, really. And obviously you can't do that whilst confidence roping. But I also find it an awful lot easier to use sticks that don't collapse, because unfortunately the amount of pressure I put through them, they do just break, those ones that collapse. So I went out with a guy who we just worked out that actually I could just, rather than faff around taking my backpack off and putting them in the correct holes where you tie them onto your backpack, I could just shove them through kind of the back underneath my arms whilst confidence roping someone. And even actually in my feedback, after the assessment, they said we were really obvious that you'd thought through all the different things. Because, for instance, that, like, we could tell that you'd practiced that, and we could tell that you'd set it up in a way that you felt confident, and it would inspire confidence in the other person, which, when it comes to something like confidence roping, is super important.
And then back to the slightly more interesting, exciting part of it, you sort of covered a little bit earlier what you're hoping to do with the qualification. What stage of that kind of business plan, if you want to, if I'm allowed to call it that, are you in at the moment? How far is it going to be until you think you're sort of set up and running, and what do you see as any sort of major challenges between now and then?
I am at the stage where I've recce'd some walks. I'm still looking for ideal venues for the camping type activities. And I think another thing that I'm trying to do, not really having much success yet, is also around kit, because another thing about people with disabilities is generally you need to try a lot of different kit in order to find the kit that works for you. And I'm not just talking comfort. Sometimes it's literally the fact that I can't use that specific system, but there's another system of the exact same thing that I can use. When you're looking at things like tents and stuff, and even jackets, to be honest, and similar with backpacks. So I am reaching out to various outdoor providers in terms of, brands that make this stuff, and asking if there's any chance that I can get samples and things like that. Would be super helpful for people to actually test these things out in reality in the hills.
To learn what they're able to use, and without wanting to assume too much, are you meaning things like, I don't know, the size of the zip pull, or the way that the tent poles connect together? Is it those the sorts of things that you had to figure out what you could and couldn't do?
Yeah, it is, but for me, I was already experienced in the outdoors, so I already knew that a lot of these things existed, or I knew that I could ask someone to change it. But if you're completely new to the outdoors, that's quite a big hurdle, and you might just use one. You might buy a tent and think all tents are like that, and that is enough to put you off ever wanting to go camping again if you can't get the tent up because you can't connect it all together, right? So by being able to give people a variety of things to try, you're kind of saying, okay, that you might need to get something specifically adapted. Obviously different people have different needs, but often by trying different things that already exist, you can sometimes find something that works for you. So that's an important part of my business plan that hasn't really got anywhere yet, unfortunately, but I will be pushing. And then I guess another thing that links into this that I didn't mention before is I'm also training to become a life coach, because I think there's areas of what else you're doing to support that it needs to everything needs to come together. And I think not everyone will need life coaching around it, but some people it will be really beneficial for. And so that will be an additional service that I'm providing. And I think it's things like making sure that I'm spending a lot of time working with and meeting with different charities and different organizations to understand what already exists and what works well and what doesn't. And I know in my mind that what I want to create doesn't exist, because that's why I want to create it. I've been searching for that for nearly 8 years. So I know it doesn't exist, but equally there might be other things that I could bring in that other people are doing that would be really beneficial.
Okay, 2 final quick fire questions then. Do you have a favorite camp food to eat when you're out?
Yeah, probably 2 things that I eat a lot of. I eat a lot of flapjacks, and I eat a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. So
Excellent. And it sounds like your game-changing piece of kit is your walking poles. Because you use them everywhere. Have you got any other kind of game-changing pieces of kit you've discovered along the way?
Yeah, several. I've had my clothes adapted, so that I don't have to say take my jacket on and off if it's rainy. So I have vents on all the arms, vents here, and vents kind of at the sides as well. That makes life a lot easier. I have a hook attached to my leg so that if it does stop working as well as it can do, or even if there's big steps and things, especially when it comes to scrambling, I have hooks so that I can manually lift it, or if 100% necessary, someone else can actually lift it for me safely.
Is that added to your brace? Sorry, the hook.
No, it's on my waterproof trousers.
Right.
Yeah, and well, any trousers actually, not just hiking trousers in general. But it just, yeah, it allows other people to sort of manhandle you in a sort of maybe way that they feel more appropriate to. So yeah, those kit adaptations have been pretty vital actually in terms of being more independent. And also in terms of then operating as a mountain leader, like appearing a bit more professional, because it's not great to need to say to someone who's on something that you're running as a professional, can you help me do my zip up, or can you do this for me? You know, it's really nice to be able to do that independently. So yeah, the adapted kit has been super helpful. Yeah, walking poles. I mean, I actually quite often use hiking poles, not in the mountains too. I prefer them to traditional walking sticks in most situations. So, yeah, they're also pretty vital for me. I don't have much core strength, so my tendency, especially on rough ground, would be just to buckle at the waist. So by having poles, I can stay upright, which means I can see what's going on around, etc., etc. So there's multiple benefits to them, really.
Amazing. And then I guess final question is, I know you said you've got some work next week down on the Southwest Coast Path. Any kind of particular destinations you're looking forward to visiting over the next few months for some walking, whether that's for work or for yourself?
So actually next week is not work. Next week is a charity trip. But so I'm looking forward to that in that stance. And I'm hoping to spend one place that I haven't done any recce's really yet in terms of looking for my business is the Brecon Beacons. I'm still quite thin on the ground in terms of accessible routes around there. So I'm hoping to spend some time in the summer looking at them from a different angle, I guess, and working out some paths that would be really welcoming to other people.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I wish you some successful trips to explore the Brecon Beacons, or Banai Brecaniog, as they are now.
True, actually, yeah.
I've been practicing that. Brilliant. Thank you, Emma, very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully this conversation will be useful to other people to listen to learn from, so that other people can engage with our qualifications a bit more seamlessly.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, you're welcome. It was nice to chat through some of the things.